Hi everyone, it's Rio CloudSync. In today's session, we'll look at Microsoft Security Service Edge, a relatively new solution Microsoft has announced. It's still currently in public preview, and it's also named Global Secure Access within the Microsoft Entra ID console, formerly known as Azure Active Directory, our identity and access management solution. In today's session, we'll look at a high-level understanding on what Microsoft SSE is, where we can identify issues within a usual customer setup, and how we can resolve these issues using the Global Secure Access solution within Microsoft Entra ID. In today's session, we'll also be accessing Microsoft Whiteboard. Usually we'll demonstrate the solution within the Microsoft Entra ID console itself. However, I think it's very worthwhile drawing out a usual customer estate, being able to identify issues and where we can mitigate and remediate these issues using the Global Secure Access solution Microsoft advocates. So with that, if we access the console, just make sure I've got the right pen, we'll draw out Entra ID. Please forgive my drawing. Entra ID. Every customer tenant will be using Microsoft Entra ID unless you're using a third-party identity provider, IDP. This is where our user accounts reside. Our user accounts will always be authenticating and always be authorized to particular applications within our organization. Also externally, these applications could be federated, these applications could be non-federated, we could be accessing the internet. There's a variety of different services our user accounts are communicating with. Therefore, we've got to be very mindful of what we're communicating with and being able to implement security, manage the security, as well as have a bit of oversight on what's flowing in as well as out. And this isn't just M365 applications and the internet. We're also talking about on-premise infrastructure, i.e. web applications, also non-web applications. So we've got Entra ID. And with that, we've got M365 apps we deal with on a day-to-day basis. This could be the likes of Word, Outlook web app, PowerPoint online, those types of applications. We also have SaaS applications we deal with on a day-to-day basis. These could be federated or non-federated apps. And both these services, per se, will authenticate with Entra ID. Once again, please forgive my drawing. It's the first time I'm doing this. They will federate against Entra ID using a access token, which is a short-lived token. So that's fine. That's the usual way our user accounts authenticate to these apps. They will authenticate to Entra ID. Entra ID will then issue a access token, which is short-lived, usually around 55 minutes to an hour, and then it will re-authenticate to Entra ID and make sure that session is still active and that health probe is still alive. We then have also the internet. So if I just change the color here and move over slightly, we have the internet. And the internet has a vast amount of services we connect to on a day-to-day basis. And it's one of those things we want to be able to protect, especially when we're trying to adopt the zero trust methodology, i.e. always verify, always authenticate, least privilege, and also segmented access, being able to reduce blast radius across our estate. And then third and finally, we've got non-M365. I don't know what I was trying to write there. Non-M365 apps, which could be an external party, so an external organization we're communicating with, i.e. we've got a source tenant, which is our tenant, and we've got a destination tenant, and there could be issues with data exfiltration from that perspective. And once more, that will be trying to authenticate with our Entra ID directory. However, we have very limited control in terms of security, very limited oversight in terms of monitoring, and and it's something where we very much are limited in terms of that management. We then, if we just pick a different color, bear with us. We then, so that's our online side of the, what we have in terms of the customer setup. We then have like an on-premise setup. Okay, and with that, just think of that as kind of two layers. Of course, some infrastructure on-premise can be a lot more extensive, a bit more complicated, but we'll just go look at a very straightforward setup. We usually have a DMZ, okay, a demilitarized zone, which is the forefront or the edge of our on-premise network, which we allow stuff in and allow stuff out. Okay, via a proxy, a firewall, and then to be able to access our on-premise line of business apps, web apps, non-web apps, we need to be able to use some sort of VPN, so virtual private network, to be able to access, as well as the proxy in and out, and the firewall. And then within here we have Active Directory domain services and web apps and non-web apps. Okay. So once more, we've got Entra ID as our centralized identity and access management solution. We've got our online side of M365, and also we've got our on-premise side. Okay. And with that, we may have Azure AD Connect, or Entra Connect in the middle, syncing up our identities from on-prem to Entra ID. And with that, we can also make use of, if I just pick the color, if we zoom in, conditional access, in which we can look at risk through sign-in or user, compliance, location, and many other different conditions. We've also got session controls as well as access controls, allow and block, and all that lovely stuff. Okay. We're missing one crucial bit of this setup, which is the user itself. So if I just draw a user, once again, please forgive my drawing. And we have a user account, okay? And that user account is then authenticating to Entra ID, and they will be granted an access token to the resources, okay? The problem we've got here is, okay, if that user account sits within our on-prem network, we have access to everything, okay? That's fine. But in today's evolving world, people working from home now. People working from home. With people working from home, they'll be using a VPN. Okay. However, what if that VPN gets compromised? That's an indicator of compromise on IOC, and with that, if that VPN gets compromised, a threat actor then has full realm of that on-premise infrastructure. Okay, so there's very limited network access segment. Okay, very limited network access segment. Once more, so we've got two issues there. We've got internet where we have very limited control. We have external organizations in which we can't stop data exfiltration. We have very limited network control within our on-premise infrastructure, so that's a no-go. And finally, we have web apps, Brill. We have web apps here, which we can use application proxy, okay, AP in Entra ID, to be able to bring those web applications to Entra ID. That's great. Okay. However, we've also got non-web applications, our line of business apps on premise, which we need to be able to bring from on premise to Entra ID. And with that, there was no capability using the likes of application proxy, as it only looked at HTTP as a protocol. We want to be able to bring our RDP apps, our SSH apps, as well as SMB file shares to on-prem. So that was something else which was missing from today's setup. So once more, you've got a bit of a high-level understanding of where we're at and where our issues reside. So then Microsoft introduced a solution called Microsoft Entra SSE, of which is kind of a Microsoft-wide area network, in essence, like a Microsoft WAN, which brings not just internet but M365, as well as private tunneling access to the cloud. Pretty much an alternative to VPN solutions, and being able to access your data wherever you are, and through more of an identity-centric solution. So if I draw this out, so we've got like a Microsoft WAN in essence. Okay, and with that pretty much in return is Entra SSE. And that brings together a secure web gateway as a zero trust network access tunnel as well. So from a secure web gateway perspective, that's looking at internet. And you'll see how this all comes together in a second. And then private access. Okay, so when we think of the internet, we're looking at stuff like web content filtering, being able to allow and block fully qualified domain names, IP addresses. IPv6 is not supported as of yet. However, that pretty much mitigates that issue here in terms of the internet. We then look at M365, okay, as an issue. So we've got the M365 side of our structure. So here, how do we mitigate user accounts and data exfiltration problems? Well, we can use M365 in our global secure access solution, our traffic forwarding profile, and with that will allow us to utilize tenant restrictions, as well as IP restoration. So tenant restrictions was a new thing Microsoft introduced, tenant restrictions v2, which allowed us to decipher whether we want our user accounts to authenticate to an external party. We can allow a block. We could use a tenant ID to be able to decipher which tenant we wanted to allow a block. And we can allow either identities or applications to be able to communicate with that external party. We also have IP restoration, which is a trusted location which Microsoft creates for us within our conditional access policies. And with that, we can tie that with our GSA client, which is installed on our local machine, to be able to restrict access to only our compliant machines and our compliant machines only, or the conditions we set within our conditional access policies. And it will very much rely on the GSA client rather than any name location we create through an IPv4 or IPv6 address range or a geolocation, because that carries a lot of overhead to be able to manage that, and a bit of oversight, especially when people work from home. So just having that GSA client installed on the local machine will help us mitigate those issues. And then third and finally, we got the Zero Trust Network Access, which is our kind of our private tunneling. And once more, all these have their individual tunnels. So that's a tunnel, that's a tunnel, and then we have our Zero Trust Network Access. So if we scroll down here, we've got our private. I'm not too sure why this whiteboard's acting up. Private, and that pretty much is just bringing our web apps, our non-web apps, through a connector we install, which has line of sight to our applications on premise, to Entra ID. We would create an enterprise app within Entra ID, which pretty much gives us that entry into our applications on premise through the likes of RDP, SSH, and SMB. Would create an application segment which is tied to that application. So once more, the free traffic forwarding profiles we can create within Microsoft Entra SSE resolve quite a few of the issues we see within our customer setup. So how does this all work per se? Well, if I zoom in over here, and once more, let's make this a bit thicker. We've got a user account. They've got a laptop. Okay. And then we install an agent. We install an agent on that laptop. That's a global secure access client. That will provide us options to sign in, sign out. As it's our identity we're looking at, it will provide us our hostname acquisition, our associated tenant ID, the flows in and out in terms of the fully qualified domain names, and a load more information we can go into, but this is just a high-level overview. What operating systems is this supported on? Well, we've got Windows. Okay, we've got Mac OS. We've got Android. We've got iOS, and we've got Linux. Please remember, when we talk Android and iOS, this is already installed in our Defender application we install on the mobile devices, so we don't need to install a separate client. As you would know, mobile devices struggle to have more than 1 to 2 VPN profiles assigned to it, so including it in the Defender application allows Microsoft to be able to utilize the Microsoft SSE Service Edge, which there are around 170 Service Edge endpoints within the Microsoft wide area map. So once more, so if we look at the tunnel to the cloud, so there will be a tunnel, okay, to the cloud, okay, from the GSA client. So from the GSA client, and that works off HTTP2. Okay, and that allows us to communicate to the cloud as well as our on-prem applications using that connector we've installed, and that combines the free internet, M365 and private, M365 and private access. Okay, and so cool. That mitigates all the issues, but also what else are the benefits? Well, when we install the GSA client and we use Microsoft SSE as a solution, over here we've got Microsoft SSE as the solution with our Service Web Gateway as well as our Zero Trust Network Access. We also make use of, if we remember rightly, conditional access, and we can do a checkbox exercise. Go, okay, my device is compliant, I'm in the right location using the IP restoration option we've got with our GSA client, we're not at risk, etc. So we can make use of conditional access, which in return leads me onto the licensing requirements, still yet to be confirmed fully, but you do need an Entra ID P1 in today's public preview. Okay, and to be able to administer the Global Secure Access solution, you will need the Global Secure Access Administrator role through Entra ID, as well as Application Administrator if you want to use private access. Okay, but other than that was a high-level overview on Global Secure Access. A lot of bad drawings, a lot of bad writing. But this was just me talking openly about Global Secure Access, and I hope that helped in some sort of way. Any questions, please feel free to fire my way, and thank you very much.